The U.S. Navy just made a stunning admission. Naval officials yesterday confirmed that 3 separate UFO videos released by the New York Times in 2017 and previewed on the show are actually genuine. They do, in fact, show aerial phenomenon the Navy cannot explain, and that, in fact, our understanding of physics cannot explain. The Navy also recently sent a letter to Congressman Mark Walker saying that it takes UFO sightings very seriously and is working to investigate them. Nick Pope is a British journalist. He once investigated UFOs for the UK Ministry of Defence. He joins us tonight to explain the significance of this. So, Nick, this does seem like a change in the way the Pentagon describes this phenomenon, is it?
Yes, it is. Up until this point, the Navy has said very little. And in fact, they've left the door open sometimes and almost implied, look, we might be dealing with commercial drones or even balloons. But now what they've done is turned around and said, number one, this is real. And number two, this is unidentified aerial phenomena. That's the phrase that they've used. Previously, they've said advanced unknown aircraft. Now they're saying unidentified aerial phenomena. And that is, it's a term borrowed from the British government. We used it in the Ministry of Defence, and we meant UFOs.
So the U.S. government is admitting that they have no idea what these things are, that they're probably not some Russian superplane, and nobody's paying attention to this. I mean, this seems like a watershed moment. I mean, we have all this tape of objects defying the known laws of physics right next to U.S. military installations. The military admits it. Why is this not page one news everywhere?
Well, it should be, absolutely. These aircraft carriers that many of these UFOs have been interacting with, obviously these are billion-dollar assets. And if the official position of the most powerful Navy in the world is, frankly, little more than, we don't know what this is, I don't think that's good enough. And I think clearly people like Mark Walker don't think so either. And I would urge him to get the classified briefing that other senators have said they've received, and maybe within the bounds of not wanting to divulge classified information, but maybe some of these senators could then step forward and at least give us a clue of what we're dealing with here.
So it turns out it wasn't a weather balloon. I mean, they've been telling us that for 50 years. Oh, it's a weather balloon. It's not a weather balloon, is it?
No, absolutely not. Somebody in the Pentagon must have. They say we don't want to hypothesize about this. That's fine. But there must be, in the Pentagon, a best assessment. And there must be a view of what they're ruling out. We should be told.
There's obviously some reason they're not telling us. In 15 seconds, hypothesize as to what that reason might be.
Well, some secret too terrible to be told. But I think we should be told, or at least we should be hinted at.
Yeah, or maybe not. I don't know. They've been lying about it for 50 years. Maybe there's a reason they have been. I don't know, Nick. This is starting to worry me. I'm grateful, though, that you have come on so frequently to put it in context for us. Good to see you tonight. Thank you.
It's a plane. It's, well, no one knows. Unidentified flying objects have been spotted by Navy pilots, and nobody knows where they're coming from. Now, people are wondering if the truth is really out there. For more on this, I'm joined by Chris Rutkowski. He is a science writer and UFO specialist. He's in Winnipeg today. Chris, a lot of people in our newsroom are talking about this chat today. So what do you make of these sightings that these Navy pilots are talking about?
Well, they're fascinating stories, first of all. We've had reports from pilots quite a few times over the years. What's interesting is that these are fairly recent, about 5 years ago, and that they've reported seeing things zipping around that they couldn't explain. Now, we are wondering, for example, where the Air Force pilots are in all of this. And also that there was one story that the pilots had watched these UFOs. After these UFOs had been seen for about 2 weeks, they finally decided to get a little closer. And I guess, you know, Russian jets are always doing incursions on the eastern seaboard or the north from time to time, and they're always acted upon and responding very quickly. Right. We wonder why this didn't happen in this case. So it raises a lot of questions, but they're great stories. Yeah.
Do you think, though, that they are actually seeing UFOs that are extraterrestrial in nature?
Well, you know, even the United States Navy doesn't say that outright. It actually hedges its bets. It says these are unidentified aerial phenomena or UFOs for any other They're not actually saying extraterrestrial. They're saying, let's take a good look at this. And I think as a scientist, we have to acknowledge this, that it's time to take a closer look. There's enough good reports by good observers. One would argue that pilots are pretty decent observers. If they're seeing something they can't explain, maybe it's time to take a closer look.
And so why? I mean, because, I mean, as you study this, and in some of the things that these Navy pilots have said is they're looking at an object that is going down very, very low and then shooting up very, very high, unlike anything they've seen. I mean, you're saying we should be paying more attention, but why haven't we, though?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a stigma that's still attached to UFOs. But, you know, the United States Air Force finished its UFO study back in 1969 and 70. We haven't really had much input of what's going on. And now we have these Navy reports. In Canada, we actually have a better record of UFO sightings. We have a fairly good record of things going back many, many years. In fact, just this past year, we've had UFO reports by pilots. So I think some people are taking a closer look, and I think maybe the United States Navy has decided maybe we should take a look at this too. So
should we be asking ourselves, is there something more out there beyond the planets, beyond the black holes? And I know we're investigating other universes, but perhaps there are other beings out there. Maybe they think we're the aliens.
Absolutely, and I think this is perfectly timed well, because there's this TV show starting tonight. There's certainly a connection there. Yeah. But also, we have this innate quest asking, are we alone in the universe? And we've just seen Thanos almost destroy the universe. So, maybe we're so used to seeing aliens that it's time to say, hey, are they really here? And it's time for science to take a closer look.
I think it is well beyond the Guardians of the Galaxy. That is for sure. Chris Rutkowski, science writer and UFO specialist, thank you so much for your insights today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
But I can't resist. I mean, this is a fascinating story of the kind that I never thought I'd cover on this show. UFOs. Now, normally my eyes glaze over, but the US Navy has for the first time acknowledged that 3 UFO videos are real. And by that I mean they're of real objects, they're not some sort of trick of the light. Or as Navy spokesman Joseph Gratishur put it, the Navy considers the phenomena contained or depicted in these 3 vids as unidentified. And it's not to say they're alien craft, of course. But here is one of those UFOs. This is footage shot in 2004 from a US military aircraft. And you'll see that video changing the focus briefly. The object jumps up in size just to see better before whatever it is they're filming takes off to the left. And then, of course, 4 years ago, there was another unidentified object which astonished the US pilots that were tracking it.
Look at that thing. It's rotating.
Well, the vice chairman, we got out of that clip too soon. Again, the object went to the left. Oh, they all go to the left. I must be against. It went to the left at speed, which is really amazing. The Vice Chairman of the US Senate Intelligence Committee says this is being investigated, although President Donald Trump is not so impressed.
Well, I think some of the press reports are accurate. I think people are taking this issue much more seriously, and I'm not going to get into any of the contents of the briefing. It was a classified briefing.
I want them to think whatever they think. They do say, I mean, I've seen and I've read and I've heard, and I did have one very brief meeting on it, but people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly.
Joining us the panel, Claire March, who's advised 3 Labor leaders and is now head of Council House, and Daniel Weil, Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs. Claire, looking at that, what do you think? You're tuning in for signals from outer space? Do you think that's interesting? Objects that fly very fast at speed and the US does not know what it is.
Perhaps a little bit boring. For me, this actually comes down to semantics. So as we know, traditionally, these objects are called UFOs, so unidentified flying objects. So that could mean, a balloon or a plane. It just hasn't been identified as such. But what makes this statement different to previous statements is they've used a different term, unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, I read that to being just a statement of what indeed the Pentagon has recognised recently, that they can't deny that there are sightings as such, whether that happens to be, anything out of this earth. is yet to be determined. But this word phenomena, meaning the object of someone's perception, essentially. We know that the Pentagon has had a program in place since 2017 to look at. It's called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. We don't know the outcome of that investigation yet. It is ongoing. This all sounds to me like a bit of semantics and a whole lot of bureaucracy.
Clear March, for someone who said you're not normally that interested in UFOs, boy, you're the full bottle. Daniel, what did you make of that? You're an ultra-rationalist. I would say, look, before people think I'm going nuts, this is almost 100% surely a man-made object, but, gee, it's interesting how it manoeuvres.
It is interesting, Andrew, but I think it's probably a much ado about nothing. All of the UFO watchers have become very interested because some different words have been used by the US Navy and the US government, but unfortunately for the X-File fans there, Andrew, I don't think there's a whole lot going on.
Well, Donald Trump was notified, so something's happening.
On the morning of May 14th, 1988, Amaury Riviera, a young man from Puerto Rico, photographed a giant disc, followed and circled by 2 jet interceptors. What makes the sensational pictures even more interesting is Riviera's claim that he had contact with the occupants of this UFO.
Hello, my name is Amaury Rivera. I live in Puerto Rico, and back in 1988, I was working in a nightclub, and there was a musical group there. One of my cousins wanted me to photograph the musical group, and she loaned me a camera with some film. On my way back home, I encountered 2 small beings, 2 small strange men, which I didn't think were men from outer space, and they took me somewhere where there were other people besides myself, other human people, like from Puerto Rico, I guess. From here, another human being showed up. He claimed to be from a distant planet. He was dressed in black. He had a dark skin, but he was not a Negro. He had a long black hair up to the shoulders, and he spoke to us with the mouth, verbally, and no telepathic speaking. He showed us various projections, which looked very real, the projections, and he informed us about a whole bunch of things that are even still incredible to me. Then they returned me to...
What did this holographic projection show?
The holographs were mainly, the first one that I can remember was like a short trip through space. We saw where he came from, where he's said to be from. We saw his people, we saw the houses that they use. And the second one was about a meteor or a rock falling to Earth in the near future, which is going to cause a lot of havoc in the world. This would fall, it's going to fall in very near the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and those other small islands. But it's going to affect the whole world, not just Puerto Rico. The last one is that they projected was showing us how there was only going to be one government on the planet Earth. They'll be living on some sort of artificial island that's going to be floating in the middle of a dark, black, dirty sea. And then this man returned me to my car again and left me somewhere different from where the whole ordeal had started. Apparently, they took me with car and all. After this, at this given time, I heard some jets in the sky, and I still had my cousin's camera, and I took the pictures, 4 of which I'm making public nowadays.
So the jets followed the UFO.
Yes, it was. They seemed to be surveilling it. I only got to capture just one of the jets in the photograph, but there were 3 of them. or maybe I got in one of the photos one, and in the second or third I got one of the other ones, because they would go around it very far away, and while this one was closer, and turn, you know, very far, very far. And by the time this one was coming back, another one was turning over there. There was always one or the other close to the object, to the UFO.
Jorge Martin has carefully investigated this case.
Rivera's case is, to me, is a very special one and a very important one, because in Amaury's case, he was abducted and he was taken away by aliens. One of them was human-like, and two small creatures that they explained to him were some type of genetical or biological organic android that they made to do some chores outside so they don't have to risk themselves in our environment. That's what they explained to him, the so-called human alien that he saw in the craft. And it's important also because of the evidences that he has on the case, because when he was released, he had a camera with him and he was able to take pictures of the object that apparently had abducted him, the craft, flying saucer type, and also of some jet fighters from the United States, excuse me, F-14 again. In most of these cases in the island, F-14s are involved with these situations of chasing and harassment and checking on these objects when they are seen in the different areas of the island. And he was able to get them in those pictures together. So this clearly, when you see those photographs, it's obvious that the government has been lying for many years, because there's the UFO there, and there's also the jet fighters dealing with the situation, which they denied for more than 40 years. It's there.
Were you able to locate any other witnesses?
That's what I was going to explain at this moment, Michael. The Amaury's case is also very important, because I have several people who apparently had been contacted by the same alien that abducted Amaury and the small ones that were with him in a separate fashion. They have nothing to do with Amaury's incident. This being, this human-like alien, is contacting people all around the area of the southwest of Puerto Rico. I have people from the town of Yauco who seem to have been contacted by this man. I have this fisherman, Andres Maldonado, who I got in contact with Amaury, because he told me several things Amaury had told no one before, only I knew them, about the name of the alien and all the details that he was using to check on the people who really may have been in contact with the same being the night he was abducted, because there were about 14 other people there in the craft that night. And when Maldonado told me all this information that he couldn't know because he was not involved with Amaury's case, I got them together. And at this moment, I have about 3 different people who seem to have been in contact with the same alien. So they are doing something, and they are getting in contact with more and more people and preparing people for something. And this is very important, because all this corroborates Amaury's incident also.
Other witnesses contacted Amaury himself.
So far, between 1988 and 1992, I've been able to localize 7 of these people. Because I've gone on different TV shows and different articles, and I've always been asking if anybody remembers anything similar happening to them, and that year, during that time, Mother's Day, to please get in touch with me. And I have gotten in touch with hundreds of people, but out of the hundreds, 7 definitely were there with me. I still have 7 to go. Maybe I'll never find them. Maybe they'll see this.
You investigated the Rivera case, Colonel Stevens. What was your impression?
Well, of course, Jorge Martin took me to meet Amaury Rivera shortly after I got there with the Mexican team to study some phenomena in Puerto Rico. And when I first met Amaury, he was very reluctant to describe his case because it still frightened him to think about it. And it took some time before we could develop enough confidence where he was comfortable talking to us about the case. But he would still tremble when he thought about it. He would turn pale. He'd become weak. He was frightened. But he has now reviewed the details and the points in sufficient length and depth that he can face the experience without the trauma, which he has learned to do. And today, or yesterday, we saw for the first time that he is able to manage his emotions well enough to describe that contact in considerable detail.
You carefully analyzed the Rivera photographs.
We took the pictures, yes. We took the pictures taken by Amaury Rivera to a NASA consultant facility in Scottsdale, where we put them through a computer analysis using latest state-of-the-art equipment. And we found that both the disc-shaped craft seen in the photographs and the aircraft are considerable distance from the camera, between 3 and 5 miles. We discovered that the jet fighter was moving and that the disc-shaped craft was moving relatively slow or not moving at all. We discovered that the ambient light conditions were correct in all respects. We were able to eliminate montages, paste-ups, reflections, models, all kinds of forms of technical manipulation of photographs, and we had to conclude that the pictures were real and that they were exactly as described by the witness when he took the photographs.
Noch dazu wurde Amaury Rivera eingeschüchtert und unter Druck gesetzt, seine Fotos herauszugeben.
Well, a short time after the incident, 3 men showed up at my home in Puerto Rico, and one of them stood in their car downstairs, and they claimed to be from CIA, and they handed me 2 pieces of paper, which I was so nervous I couldn't really read, but I remember seeing the letter CIA, which is the intelligence agency from the United States, and they said that it would be easier and better for me if I handed them the photographs and the negatives, but they did not say, what photographs or what negatives. They didn't specify, and I just told them that I did not know what they were talking about. And they said it would be easier because we have an order to register your house, to look through your house. And I said, well, go ahead, be my guest and look. And they looked, but they couldn't find them because I had hid them very well.
Nephilim, the true story of Satan, fallen angels, giants, aliens, hybrids, elongated skulls, and so on and so forth. And, we're going to talk about the scriptures in Genesis, the book of Enoch, as well as other ancient texts. But I'm very thrilled to have, for the first time, the floor of Wisdom Radio. Everybody, welcome Trey Smith. The fallen angels. Let's expand on that a little bit, because that's what some people are calling them aliens. So what do you? Let me ask you this: do you think that aliens are demonic beings, or are they just aliens, extraterrestrials from
Yeah, of course they are. The answer to that is yes. Yes. What you're dealing with is the same thing that all of the ancient records would. What the ancient records would have called underworld gods. Well, first of all, Sean, if you were dealing with something coming from another planet, so if you legitimately had somebody that was banging together spaceships on another planet and coming back and forth to here, I mean, you can type into the internet right now and you're going to find all sorts of things doing things that baffle physicists in the sky, which is interesting in and of itself. But if you've got that sheer volume of something coming back and forth, you would think we would sense the traffic. Your next thing is going to be that the telltale sign of the UFO phenomenon, if you want to call it that, has always been that you've got something appearing and disappearing right in thin air. The same thing with the abduction experiences, that you've got something walking right out into reality inside people's homes and then vanishing. So the question really fundamentally becomes at that point, where is it when you don't see it? Mm-hmm. Now, the answers that they're ultimately going to veer you towards with that particular question, in my opinion, and historically speaking, there's extensive literature on this. And what sort of the end game sales pitch is And it'll go something like this, that you've got a dimension running parallel to this one, and that dimension has got ascended beings in it, if you will, which is what the ancient cultures would have pitched as well. And that these guys have been helping our development, and so they're older than us, they're wiser than us, and so we ought to listen to them. My opinion is completely the reverse of that you're dealing with something that is inferior to you. This is demonstrated. You wouldn't even need one page of a Bible to demonstrate this. The sheer fact that you're dealing with something that needs to be summoned already tells you that there's something intrinsic to the nature of this place, which it requires permission to come in. See, because if it was actually above you, it would not require your permission to come in and do what it wanted to. There's some reason why it needs you. And I can take that a step further, too, and tell you that in the many, many people who I've talked to who have had these experiences, Sean, they're absolutely terrified. See, whether they undergo hypnosis or remember, events that happened to them, it doesn't matter what they do to recollect. The experience of interaction with these things is terrifying. And also you're going to find redundancies in your ancient texts of, bringing the gods, semen. This is something that I plan to expound on in a future video. But I'm telling you that this stuff about the gathering the eggs and semen is not trite. And that this is so prevalent that we've made jokes out of it that the aliens are going to probe you. But the aliens, the quote-unquote aliens, seem to have a significant interest in people's sexual parts.
Talking about aliens and the fact that they are demonic beings, Trey, you mentioned that we've been using them for their help for development. And I've heard numerous reports and stories that the so-called elites of the world have been getting, intel and information on how to, build things and advanced technology and things of this nature. Can you kind of expand on that and your thoughts?
In every ancient culture across the globe, no, Sean, my opinion is, Sean, that what the people are talking about and playing with is something more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. That they're dealing with the same thing that the pharaohs were dealing with, or that the Sumerians were dealing with when they're doing these enormous ritual summonings. And so when we think about technology, Sean, we think about our iPads or our cars, or the automated car factory that's putting the car together, or our space shuttles that NASA builds. You have to think a little bit larger than that with what's being dealt with here, because see, technology is really intrinsic to the place that you're in. Everything from the little DNA strands, which these things seem very interested in. Right, your DNA or your genome is literally what puts together a person, or what puts together a baby turtle or a baby seal or a baby anything. And so you've got extensive records all throughout history of things that have a real dire interest in making entrance to this place and doing it through a physical body. That's really, in a sense, what the word Nephilim means. This would mean fallen one. So in your oldest records of this place, you've got these entities that made entrance. So this is covered in the Book of Enoch, and it's covered in the opening in Genesis 6. So, and the word used there is B'nai Ha Elohim. What this means is a direct creation of God. This can be translated as angel. Now, when people think of angels, they often think of what's on their Valentine's Day cards and these type of things where they've got something cutesy with wings. What I would tell you, Sean, is that what the early Christians would have believed, including your most famous historians from ancient times like Josephus, what they would write about angels and what you see on a Valentine's Day card are two entirely different things. That these are powerful entities that can reduce them, that can literally make entrance to this thing that we call reality. And this is what these ancient cultures were summoning. And the world that the ancient cultures believed existed is a place that in Egyptian would be called the underworld. In the Samaria, it would be called the Abzu, the abyss, the places of the deep. So this is where the gods, quote unquote, come from. And all of these cultures, you're going to find that they have names for a creator god that they know. Like in Egypt, they knew that there was a god named Tem that created everything, but they just didn't know him because they were interacting with their little underworld gods, the demons in Christian, the little things that needed to be appeased, that needed to be summoned, that needed to be fed. And so when you're talking about people that that rule the world, or that rule your financial systems, or these kind of things, it's my very strong look. Every culture, all of them, from Egypt to Samaria to your religious empires such as Catholicism, Islam, what you're going to find is that there's always an outer religion for the Goyim. That's a term that they would use. And you also have your inner religion for your illuminated ones, right? And so in Nazi Germany, for example, the symbolism for the swastika.
Trey, let me ask you, where do you think this whole notion that angels have wings came from? You know, when most people think of angels or they hear about angels, they think of this being with wings, and nowhere in the scriptures does it reference anything about angels having wings.
Well, the cherubim do get described with wings, and so do the seraphim. But these are angels that and the angels on the Ark of the Covenant had wings. But by and large, what you're seeing, whether it's something demonic in the text, or what you're seeing, or what you're seeing when you're seeing angels that you're reading stepping in, like the angels that came to Abraham, or the angels at Sodom and Gomorrah, are described in such a way that they could look ordinary, like you and I. The only thing that makes them extraordinary is if you saw it, they've just stepped into reality from somewhere else.
Right, and that's more or less what I was referencing.
But when you're reading, this is what I'm telling you, Sean, is that there, particularly in the last couple of years since I've been doing these videos, a lot of people write to me with things that, in fact, there are people listening to the show right now, that there's experiences that you've had in your life, from something mild that may have been something spooky, with just, friends playing with maybe a Ouija board or something occultic. And I'm sure there's some of you listening to the show that have had really, really dramatic ones, things that, experiences, both light and dark, that, are things that you probably don't talk about or tell other people about because they might think differently of you, at least in your own mind, you feel that way. And what I'm telling you is that, number one, I believe you, but more than that, we're infants in something that is larger than what we understand, and the picture really is bigger. And yes, Sean, there are people that understand that full and well, and in fact, that's what Christians should understand. That's what your Bible is telling you. And I'll take that a step further, and I'll tell you that the people that are doing the occulty things, the little witchy things, Do they get information and knowledge from the beings that they do their little ceremonies to and that they converse with? Well, of course they do. But they're foolish enough to believe that any of that is for their benefit. Because, see, the reward that they're getting, the little bit of gold or the little bit of shiny stuff or the little carrot on the stick that they're following, see, I'll tell you this, that I disagree with Pharaoh, Sean. See, the ancient pharaohs used to have this book called the Book of the Dead. What the Book of the Dead really is it's a bunch of prayers that say, help me, help me, help me. But they had a bunch of spells, if you will, is what we would call them. But these were basically things that they were going to say to these ancient serpents when they walked into the underworld, and basically explain to the underworld gods, which are primarily snakes, that I served the god of Osiris, and so I'm supposed to be treated better here. Let me tell you something, Sean. There are no deals between devils and men. And I think that those ancient snakes are going to look Pharaoh in the eyes, just like they'll look the people today in the eyes, and they'll laugh the second you walk into snake world. And what they're going to what they're going to think that they're going to tell you, you've been paid in full. That the trinkets and the little shiny stuff and the few little girlies that you got or whatever else you were paid in, that was payment in full. And the things that I hear, Sean, from folks that have had experiences with these things that walk, these things, whether it be a small little experience or not, they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified. And people that are doing the occult little rituals, what it's telling you in your Bible is that even Lucifer himself can appear as an angel of light. And why would he not do that? Because what you're looking at is you're looking at something that's giving you its best representation of itself, which is also the reason why when you're dealing with alien abductee people, that they all have replacement memories, right? They'll remember an owl or they'll remember something else, and it has to be penetrated with hypnosis, because whatever it is that's doing this is terrified that you would know about it. The thing that's supposed to be bigger and smarter and all that than you, it's scared to death that you would see beyond its little mask. What I find in those Sumerian texts is that they were doing occult practices, the same kind of practices. See, when you're dealing with secret societies, you're not finding these people building better iPads to communicate with something through technology. No, they're doing Babylonian and Egyptian practices. They're doing rituals, and the reason why they're doing them is because they're effective. Is because it's the same principle behind why a Ouija board will work. It's the same principle behind that, that evil feeling that may have messed with you or one of your friends, or that you could sense something there, but you couldn't put your finger on it. Well, this is just a bigger Ouija board, and one where they're actually interacting with something. And I would argue that the thing presents itself in whatever formula is conducive to you. So for one guy, it might be a little Indian woman that talks to him at night. For another person that's into Egyptian stuff, it might be communications with the god Ra. This is what Aleister Crowley was extensively into this. In fact, he was the one who said, and I quote, "Today they call them angels and demons. Tomorrow they'll call them something else." And this was the first place where you see a drawing of an alien is from Aleister Crowley. As far as I know, he's the first person that drew what you see all over these television shows with the large-headed, large-eyed character. And this was a character that which he called Lamb, which made entrance to him during an occult ceremony. By his own, he was excited to tell you this.
Ray, real quick, this is a short break because we're going into the second hour. The second hour, I want to talk about the book of Enoch. But real quick, before we close out this hour, I want to know, in your opinion, why do you think Christians dismiss some of this information so much, as fallen angels and Nephilim and so on and so forth, things that are in the Bible?
Well, I don't know that they dismiss it, Sean. They they haven't been taught it.
Well, and that's a better question. Why do you think this stuff is not being taught in today's church?
Well, I think a part of the reason why is because, well, Sean, since it's a short break, this is what. Let me just answer it like this. Is the things that I'm telling you right now are the same things that the early Christians would have told each other. These are the things that I'm telling you right now come directly out of their writings, and these are teachings that Josephus. These are beliefs that certainly Josephus would have had, and so why they're lost today, the answers for that are innumerable. But one of the reasons why is because the texts were removed by the Catholic Church. They were, portions dealing with the angels, and so it is what it is, Sean. But it's not just there; it's extensive, and people haven't been taught about it. That's the long and the short of it.